Hi, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of some gothic horror mashups, and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be doing my April wrap-up. So this month didn't go exactly as I had hoped. I had a bunch of DNFs, which I'll talk to at the end. I'll go ahead and start with the books that I actually did read. And the first two I want to start out with is a bit of a cheat because I actually read them in March, but I was doing Gabby's favorite thrillers for that video and it was doubling for my wrap-up because I thought that's all I would have time to read. But I actually flew through them and managed to read two other books, but I kind of want to just keep it with Gabby's favorite thrillers, so I decided to hang on to these until the following month. So even though I technically read these in March, I just want to go ahead and still talk about them. So the first one is The Resurrectionist by A. Ray Dunlap. And I loved this book. I thought it was so good. It was everything I wanted it to be. This is about the Burke and Hare murders, where they would kill people during Victorian times in order to sell their bodies for medical research. And so, as the title would suggest, our main character is going to school to be a medical student and decides to be a resurrectionist to make some extra money to pay for his tuition. And it does have a love story in it, and I want you to be aware of that because I'm not reading this, for romance. I want all the gory, macabre stuff. So just know that it's there, but it's not like too prominent, which I was relieved by because I really just wanted it to focus on the resurrectionist stuff, and for the most part it does. So I was pleasantly surprised. So the ending of this, it does wrap up nicely, so you can read this as just its own thing. Like, it's not like a cliffhanger or anything, but it does kind of set it up to where these two boys in the story could be having another adventure somewhere. And so I'm kind of hoping that there is going to be a sequel where they, go to a different place and have a new adventure together. But so like I said, not a cliffhanger. It does wrap up nicely. You can read it as just a standalone, but it also sets it up to where there could be a sequel. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was well written. I thought it was fun. It had all the atmosphere and the macabre stuff that I was looking for. So I really enjoyed my time with this one. 5 stars. And then I read The House of My Mother by Sherry Frankie. And I don't know if I'm going to give this one a rating because I feel weird when it's like a memoir or nonfiction giving it a rating because it's not fictional. So I can't just say, oh, well, I didn't like your story, even though it's real. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to give this a rating, but I did enjoy this one. I thought it was a good read. It was one of those reads where when I'm not reading it, I'm always thinking about it and I'm always wanting to get back to it because I just found it fascinating. So for those who may not know, Sherry Frankie is the daughter of Ruby Frankie, who was like this really popular family influencer on YouTube, and everything looks so wholesome and pure, and she would show her cute little family and people just ate it up. But then it turns out that she was pretty abusive, and she actually had a therapist that made things like way worse, who was supposed to be helping, but she was actually just as abusive, and she was manipulative, and she preyed upon Ruby, who was already a narcissist, and made the situation way worse for her family. So this is not an entertaining story, like it's very sad, it's very tragic, but I did enjoy my time reading it, and I'm glad to finally have read this. And then I read the long-awaited Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, and this was very nostalgic. This was very fun. This was very entertaining. I really enjoyed it for the most part because there was a section towards the end, specifically Haymitch's Hunger Games, that I felt was pretty lame. So like the beginning part, it was very fun and I really enjoyed it, and I was eating it up, and I watched all the Hunger Games movies again because I just was so excited. But when we got to the actual like Hunger Games section of this book, not only does the trilogy already tell you everything that happens, so nothing's a surprise, but I just felt like his Hunger Games was kind of lame, and I know that's probably an unpopular opinion. I like the concept of it because everything is very beautiful, like flowers and bunnies and, meadows and everything else. But it turns out that everything is poisonous and you can't actually eat any of the food that's just around. Like there's water everywhere. There's apples growing on trees. There's food and water aplenty, but you can't eat or drink any of it because it will kill you. And so the concept of that is super intriguing and interesting. And it's kind of a nice analogy for the capital itself because they're, very luxurious and to them beautiful. I wouldn't call them beautiful, but to them, everything's very opulent and beautiful. But, it's obviously hiding their corrupt hearts. But so I liked the parallel of that and I liked the concept of it, but the execution was kind of lame because pretty much it was just mutts the entire time, but they're like butterflies or, different things like that. And so it wasn't intriguing to me. It wasn't interesting. And the way that Suzanne Collins sets it up, this might be a minor spoiler. So if you don't want to hear this, go ahead and fast forward a few minutes. I'll put spoiler right here so that you'll know when I'm done talking about this. Suzanne Collins, she sets it up to where the ones that aren't the careers, they're like, we outnumber them by a lot. So let's just go ahead and, all band together and make this one big group and go against the careers group, which I thought was super cool idea. And Haymitch being a boy, I don't want to be sexist, but, I figured because he's a boy, he might be a little bit more aggressive than Katniss was. Instead of like running and hiding for the most part, he might be more willing to actually get in action and fight. And so I thought there was going to be like this cool actual battle sequence between the newcomers, I think is what they called them, and the careerists. But it just petered out. Like it didn't go anywhere. They had all this set up. And then when they actually got to the Hunger Games, like Haymitch just like splits off to do his own thing. And it's understandable if you've read the book why he does. But I thought he would like do stuff with them first before he splits off. But no, he just splits off and then like a bunch of people die and like you don't get to even see it. And so it was very anticlimactic in that sense. And so I just thought that was really disappointing. And I understand again the analogy because she was trying to set up how the districts outnumber the capital, and so they should rise up against them. Like I understand the reasoning behind it, but I just wanted to see it play out in the actual Hunger Games a little bit before it just ends, like, I don't know. It made Haymitch's Hunger Games pretty boring because, like I said, we had this big build-up set up to that thing, and then pretty much everything else we already knew from the other trilogy, and so, I don't know, it was pretty lackluster. Okay, so, spoiler over. So for the most part, I really, really did enjoy this. I thought it was a little bit funny that Haymitch's girlfriend is pretty dang similar to Lucy Gray. And I don't know if Suzanne Collins was trying to show like the difference between Haymitch and Snow loving the same like covey type girl, like, and how it could have played out. I don't know. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe she wasn't trying to say anything. But so Haymitch, when it comes to Lenore Dove, he always calls her his love. He's like, oh, my darling, oh, my love, And I thought it was pretty cringy because he's a 16-year-old boy, and 16-year-old boys do not talk like that. Nobody really talks like that anymore, really. But I don't know, every time he was like, Lenore, my love, I just cringed. So I thought that was kind of funny. So it doesn't matter, but I just wanted to mention it just because I don't know. So it wasn't like a perfect read, but at the same time, the first half of this book, I had so much fun and it was so nostalgic, and I really did enjoy my time a lot with this, so I would give it 4 stars. Okay, and then I read All Better Now by Neal Shusterman, and I'm a huge Neal Shusterman fan. I love everything he writes. I think he does a fantastic job of showing like all aspects of the idea that he's trying to tell us about. So he'll set up like different characters in order to show like the different ways you could think about certain plots or the way certain technology would play out. I hope I'm making sense. But, I like that it's not just one perspective. You get to see lots of different perspectives on it. And this one's no different. So this is about a virus. And if you catch this virus, if you live, it makes you very like euphoric. Not really necessarily euphoric, actually, more like content. And so you just don't really care about hardships in the way that you did before. You don't get angry. You don't get upset about the little things, You kind of have like a more zen perspective to your life now. And so it shows like how society would react to people like this. And I thought it was super fascinating. If you're not ready or willing to read books about COVID, then maybe take a pass because it does mention COVID quite a bit. and it is about a virus, so just be aware of that going in. But for the most part, I thought this was really fun and really good, but I will say I thought it was a little too long. I think this is like over 500 pages. Yeah, and that's not necessarily a problem as long as I'm hooked the entire time, but it was starting to feel slightly repetitive, like, okay, I understand the virus, I understand the implications of this virus, like, let's kind of move on, you know? And two of our main characters, they're supposedly in love, but it was like super insta-lovey because it's like the first time they met, it doesn't really go well. But then he gets sick and she, is there and she stays by his side until he's better. And then from that point on, they're just like instantly in love. But there's no other aspect of their relationship that would show why they're in love, other than she was supportive of him while he was sick. But that just really isn't enough to justify it because I don't know, that's just being a good person. So I thought that part was a little lacking. But other than that, I really did enjoy it. I thought it was a fun time. And this is going to be a duology, so I do look forward to the next one. And I would give this 4 stars as well. And then I read The Hive by Orson Scott Card and Aaron Johnston. And ironically, this is the one I was the most afraid to read this month because I read The Swarm, which is the first in this trilogy, and I found it pretty boring and hard to get through. So this has been sitting on my shelf for years, and I'm like, okay, I guess this is the time to finally read it. If you saw my TBR video, you'll know why. So I was pretty nervous to read this one. But as it turns out, I actually really enjoyed it. So yay! This was much, much better than The Swarm. It has all the characters that I've already loved from the first prequels trilogy. And this one wasn't boring. At least I didn't think it was. I thought it was much more interesting and intriguing. In the beginning, it kind of tells you what The Swarm was about, so you could probably even just skip that one, honestly. But yeah, I thought this was fun. I thought it was entertaining. I really can't say too much about it, though, because you really need to know the world, because this is part of like a huge series. So if you're familiar with Ender's Game, this is about the Formics when they first came to Earth to attack us. But there's a prequel trilogy, and then this is the second Formic War. So this is part of the second prequel trilogy. So that's why I can't really say that much about it, because you kind of need to be immersed in the world and in the, and know who these characters are to really know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to spoil things for anybody who hasn't read it yet. But I can tell you in general what this series is about. So basically, in a future world, the Earth has come together in a time of temporary peace and have formed a hegemony that basically, unifies the Earth to go against this alien race that has come and attacked Earth. So they're like, we're going to put our differences aside and our squabbles, and we're going to fight these aliens, So they come together, and they've decided that having a group of young people be trained up to be the commanders is the best idea, because when you have a bunch of nations all fighting together and you have a bunch of people in the military, they're all turning into like careerists where they're more interested in having medals and advancing their own careers than they are about protecting Earth and protecting the populace. And so a lot of them end up being corrupted, or some of them are like nationalists that only really care about where they come from, like China or Russia or whatever, instead of being a unified Earth like they're supposed to be. And so they decided, after getting their butts kicked by the buggers, which is what they call the Formics as like a slang term, is we're going to have these young people brought up to be our commanders so that they don't have those same qualms and they'll actually get the job done. And plus, kids are so like innovative anyways and creative, and they don't have the same hiccups that adults have, And so they're like, they're more creative. They're going to think outside the box. They're going to come up with these brilliant ideas. So let's just let them figure this out for us, basically. So that's what Ender's Game is about. And this whole series is based around that. But this is, like I said, when the Formics first come to Earth and we're first learning, this is like a first alien contact story in the beginning. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed this one a lot. I thought it was a good time. I'm not sure what to rate it. Probably 5 stars. I mean, I really didn't have anything negative to say about it, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'd probably give it 5 stars. And then if you saw my scavenger hunt video, you'll see that I chose You Are Invited by Sarah Denzel. And this is a story about this woman who is a writer, but she gets invited by this famous makeup influencer to go live in this monastery in Romania for a month and be part of this live stream with other influencers. And so she's like, oh, this would be a good idea. This would be a good way to get my books out and make my own follower account go up, you know? And so they have like 5 other people there. So you have like the makeup person who's the host, and then you have like the exercise guru, and then she's the writer, and then they have a podcaster, and I can't remember what the last guy was. Oh, he's a gamer. I couldn't remember what he was. So anyway, so you have all these people living in this house together, and they're live streaming this the entire time. And then people can give like donations for them to do certain things. And so they're like, we're going to have all these followers and we're going to make all this money and it's going to be awesome, you know. But the people that are watching this live stream start seeing like shadows in the background or people standing in doorways. And so they're trying to warn them, hey, I don't think you're alone in that house. And it turns out that at this monastery or convent, there was a massacre and a bunch of nuns died, all except for the Mother Superior. And so now they're beginning to think that the house is haunted. So I didn't think this was a perfect book. It kind of lagged a little bit in the middle. For a bunch of influencers being together for a month, I would think that they'd have more content, but really they just ended up going on a bunch of walks all the time. They're just like, I have nothing better to do. Let's go for a walk. Okay. So that part was a little bit lackluster, but other than that, I really had a fun time with this. I thought it was fun. I thought it was cozy. It had all the atmosphere that I wanted from a good ghost story. So while I don't think this was a 5-star read, I really did enjoy my time with it, and I thought it was a lot of fun, and I would give this 4 stars. And then I had a couple of NetGalley arcs that I needed to get read, and the first one was called Myra, and I believe this comes out in June, like June 22nd, I think. But this one, unfortunately, I really should have just DNF'd, honestly, but it was pretty short, and I really did want to see what the mystery was behind this house, because you have this woman who goes to this house in like the swamps of Florida to be with her childhood friend, and she hasn't seen her for like 10 years. But to be honest, there was nothing remotely creepy or scary about this book. At least I didn't think so. The creepiness surrounding the house was very minimal. This book, by and large, is very, very, very character focused. This is largely about the relationship between her and her friend. And so you have a lot of flashbacks to when they were children, or they might have been in college, but I think it was more like high school. But either way, the focus was not about the mystery surrounding the house. It was really about the relationship. And I've discovered about myself that I am more of a plot-driven reader instead of a character-focused reader. And so for me, it gets pretty boring when you just read endless pages about this relationship and flashbacks about their childhood, because I just don't care. You know, I'm just like, I want to know about the creepy house. I want to know what's going on in this swamp. You know, like that's what I want to read about. And the mystery surrounding the house is really like the only last 10% of the book, maybe. And I shouldn't have bothered, because by the time I got there, I was just like, meh. Like, I don't know. This just was not a book for me. If you're more into character development, character studies, more into like literary books, this one might work for you if you just want like a dollop of horror with your friendship book. But for me personally, I read horror books for the horror. And so I just felt this was pretty disappointing. So maybe a generous 2 stars for this one. And then I read The Bachelorette Party by Camilla Sten. And this is my 3rd book by Camilla Sten, and unfortunately, when I've read 3 books and I didn't really care for any of them, then I think I'm done with this author. I didn't hate any of her books. They're always just okay, though. They don't ever seem super special, or, you know, they just kind of seem mediocre. And this one in particular seems the most mediocre out of the 3 that I've read from her. I think this one comes out in July, by the way, in case you're still interested. But this cover is absolutely gorgeous, and I was really excited to read this one. But it just was very, very like typical popcorn thriller. So maybe if you're not looking for anything that stands out and you just want something to while away a few hours, then maybe this would work for you. But I don't know, I got pretty bored in the middle. So I liked the setup because we have this group of friends that go to this island and then a massacre happens. And then flash forward like 12 years, you have another group of friends that's going to the same island for a bachelorette party because their friend's getting married. And one of them, our main character, she is actually, I mean, she's there for the bachelorette party, but she's actually there because she's a true crime podcaster and things have not been going well in her career because of a certain incident. And so she's hoping that if she discovers what happened to these women on this island and makes a podcast out of it, then she can resurrect her career. And so that's kind of more her motivation for being there. But the whole middle part is just like kind of like with Myra, where you're just like have these friends and they're doing bachelorette things, and I don't know, I just kind of lose interest. It starts to feel laggy and I just want to get to the end, you know. I just want to get to the mystery and get with what happened. And I understand you have to have a middle. Like if you're just going to do like the setup and the end, it's not going to be as satisfying and it's going to be too short. Like I understand as an author why you have these somewhat laggy middle parts in sections. And sometimes I don't mind it, you know. Sometimes I'm interested enough in the friend group, or I'm interested enough in just the atmosphere and the general story that's going on. And then other times I just want to skip it and get to the end. And in this book, that was the case. And so I read the ending, and the ending, I mean, it was exciting, it was fun, but I don't know, at the end of the day, I just felt like this was just a typical thriller. There was nothing really special or cool about it, and it was just okay. So I'm going to give this a 3 stars. Okay, so now we're going to get to my DNF. The first DNF I had was Alien Clay by Adrian Drukovsky. This is my first book by this author, and it's not going to be my last. I still have a few others that I want to try out from him, but this is his newest release. And in the beginning, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. So you have this man who's kind of having like treasonous thoughts and starts to do treasonous type things, and he gets caught. And in this world set in the future, we actually know about a few other planets. And so there's this one planet in particular where they send prisoners to work at these work camps to make them useful instead of just wasting their time in prison on Earth. And so he gets sent to this alien planet, but because he was a professor and he's very academic, they decide to use him to research the actual planet, because there is alien life there as far as like animals and insects go. And there's these big structures that prove that there was sentient life there at one point, but there's no evidence of sentient alien life living there right now. It's like they just disappeared, they just vanished, and they want to know what happened to them and why they're not here anymore. And so they kind of want to use him, which is a very intriguing premise. I was very excited to learn about these aliens and learn about this planet, but I didn't really connect to the main character. I thought he was pretty unlikable. And there was just endless pages upon pages about the evil, corrupt government on Earth that he was trying to go against. But what was frustrating about that is became very repetitive, where he just kept bringing it up and bringing it up, but he would never actually give you any details about why they were so evil and corrupt. So you knew they were, but you're like, but why? And you might get like tiny little snippets, but I wanted more. And when you're like past 100 pages and they're not giving you any information, I got really annoyed with that. And then as far as like the alien stuff, I don't know, it just wasn't hooking me in as much as I thought it would. Like some chapters here and there were kind of interesting and kind of intriguing, but you know, by the time I hit like 150 pages, I was just like, do I really care about this book? Really? Not really. So I decided not to waste my time. But generally when I DNF a book, I do read the ending just because I want to see what happens. So I did read the last few chapters, and I thought it went pretty predictably how I thought things would go. I mean, there was one aspect that I didn't really see coming, but I didn't really care about it either. I don't know. So yeah, I didn't finish this one, unfortunately. And then I had a doctor's appointment, which is right across the street from the library. So I thought I'd just go peruse their new release section and see what I could find. So I picked up Elfie because I love Wicked. I love the play and I love the movie. And I didn't read the book because I tried reading it like 15 years ago, but there was a lot of sexual stuff in it and that's not for me. I don't like it. But, this is about Elfie's childhood. So I'm like, well, and it's pretty short. So I'm like, it might be fun. I would like to learn more about Elfie and learn about her childhood and how she grew up. But, oh my gosh. I only made it 5 chapters in before I had to stop because immediately I hated the writing style. I hated it so much, and I hate saying that, and it's not even, yeah, it came across as like pretentious, and very literary, but it's not even that. Like, I've read literary books that sound pretentious, but they are actually beautiful, and I can see past it, but it was just like annoying. Like, the way this book is written just really grated on me. And then not only that, but it's like an omniscient narrative style. And so instead of being the head of any of the characters, it's just somebody telling the story. So it'd be like, the baby did this and Elfie did that. But he doesn't even call her Elfie, he just calls her the girl. The girl did this, and then the baby did that. And then the mother was doing this, and then the nanny was doing that. And it just made it feel very flat. It makes me feel like very removed from the story. And I couldn't stand it. I could not stand the writing style in this book. And I read a lot of reviews because that's what I do when I don't like a book. I read reviews to see if it's worth pushing through or not. And it seems to be that most people say that you don't really gain that much from this book that you didn't already know. Like, when you expect to read a book all about Elfie's childhood, you expect to have a lot of like character development surrounding Elfie, but they were saying that you don't really gain any more insight than you already knew. You don't really learn anything new about her. So I'm like, okay, well, then this is a pointless book, and I'm not gonna suffer through this writing style to get nothing out of it. So yeah, I didn't make it very far before I decided to give up. So that was a shame. And next we have A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I knew going into this that it probably wasn't going to be my thing. I was mainly reading this for my sister's sake because she was really into it. And I was feeling a little bit of FOMO, I won't lie, because everybody seems to be reading this book, or this series, I should say. So I just wanted to give it a try, get out of my comfort zone a little bit. And I think had I read this 15 years ago, I probably would have liked it. But I just don't think it's my thing anymore. So I DNF'd this book 200 pages in. So the first 50 pages was actually pretty good, and I was enjoying it and thought it was a good introduction into this world. But after that, the pace slowed way down and got pretty boring, in my opinion. And so I just was waiting for things to happen. And this basically reads like a Beauty and the Beast retelling meets Twilight, but with fae instead of vampires. And like I said, I think I'm too old for this book, honestly. I really think that's what it is, because I just thought this main protagonist was so immature, and she was driving me crazy, and I did not like her. But at the same time, I do read YA books, and I do enjoy YA books, so it just kind of depends on the protagonist, whether I'm going to vibe with them, and I just didn't with this one. Like, for instance, I marked a passage. Okay, so this is Tamlin. He is the love interest, and he says, "I bit her. We ran into each other in the hall after the rite. She seems to have a death wish." And so his buddy was like, that's not cool. And he's like, "So if Feyre can't be bothered to listen to orders, then I can't be held accountable for my consequences." "Accountable?" I sputtered, placing my hands flat on the table. "You cornered me in the hall like a wolf with a rabbit. While I might not have been myself, Lucian and I both told you to stay in your room," Tamlin said, so calmly that I wanted to rip out my hair. I couldn't help it, didn't even try to fight the red-hot anger that raised my senses. "Fairy pig," I yelled, and Lucian howled, almost tipping back in his chair. At the sight of Tamlin's growing smile, I left. So, I don't know, to me, it sounds like a teenager having a temper tantrum, and the love interest sounds like her dad. I don't know, he's definitely more mature, which makes sense because he's immortal and he's like hundreds or maybe even thousands of years old. But at the same time, she just comes across as very immature and very whiny, and that did drive me nuts because they did tell her, stay in your freaking room, don't come out because it's dangerous, and she does, twice. Not even just once, but twice, because she's hungry. And I'm like, ugh, like, I don't know. I hate it when people make this stupid decisions like that just for the sake of plot or just for the sake of getting it to move along, you know? I just think it's a weak way to do things because there's better ways of handling it than just having her come across as dumb and immature, you know? Like, have a real reason that she might leave her room, you know? Like, I don't know. I just don't like that. And this book, I can already tell that it's going to have like a love triangle, and I just kind of get sick of those after a while. I'm kind of over the whole love triangle thing. But it sounds like the other guy, Rysand, is very toxic, and I just can't get behind him. So again, I have a passage that I marked. Okay, so he says, and I'll remember precisely where my hands have been. But if anyone else touches you, let's say a certain high lord who enjoys springtime, meaning Tamlin, I'll know. And Feyre, I don't like my belongings being tampered with. And then it says, Rysand didn't touch me, but he walked close enough for it to be obvious that I was with him, that I belonged to him. I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd attached a collar and leash around my neck. Maybe he would at some point, now that I was bound to him, the bargain marked on my flesh. So, like, yes, there is some kind of fairy magic that has to do with this part, but at the same time, knowing that he's going to become a love interest, I just don't like it. I don't like toxic relationships. I don't like reading about toxic relationships. And I hear this book gets very, very, very smutty. So this first one wasn't too bad. There was like a little bit of sexy stuff, but it wasn't too bad. But I hear from here on out it gets pretty smutty. And to be honest, I don't think that belongs in YA books. You know, if you want to do that kind of thing, it needs to be new adult or just adult. And some people are like, oh, well, really, it's only the first book that's YA, and then the rest of the series is new adult. Well, I think that's unfair, because you might have these younger readers that are like 13 that really shouldn't be reading that kind of stuff, and they get invested in the first book, and then they switch the genre on you. Like, I just don't think that's fair. Or not genre, but the age gap or whatever. Like, I don't know. I just personally don't feel that that belongs in YA books, and I don't like reading about toxic relationships. And like I said, this kind of felt like Twilight, but it doesn't have nostalgia factor. And so I still read and enjoy Twilight, even though I know it's not well written, even though I know that Edward could be creepy and toxic himself. But at the same time, it has that nostalgic factor, and I don't have that with this book, so it just isn't the same. It doesn't hit the same. So, like I said, maybe if I read this 15 years ago, maybe I would have enjoyed it. But reading it now as a 38-year-old, I just don't like it. It's just not my thing. So I tried it for the sake of my sister. I was going to read the whole thing for her sake, but I just couldn't do it anymore. So I only made it about halfway. So next I read Wool. And like Alien Clay, this is a science fiction novel that just didn't work for me on a multiple of levels. So the first part, which is like the first 42 pages, was really good and really interesting and intriguing, and it made me really excited to read this book. But then when you get into part 2, the pacing slows way down to like a snail's pace. And the next 50 pages or 100 pages even is just so slow and boring. And I'm just like, okay, move on. We know you're going down to the sublevels of the silo to figure out who's going to be the next sheriff. We get it. Move on. So I guess I forgot to mention what this book is actually about. So this is a dystopian novel about humanity who is living in this big silo because the rest of Earth has become toxic and you can no longer survive outside in the natural air. And so they live underground in these big silos. And the way to describe it is essentially you're living in a skyscraper, but underground. so it has 145 or 144 staircases or levels. In a nutshell, this is what the story is about. It's very, very taboo to say that you want to go outside or that you want to leave. And so if you say that or mention it, it's an automatic eviction and they kick you out to the outside world for the toxins to get you. But it's like super, super, super taboo. Like you can't even joke about it. So I marked a passage to share with you guys. Okay, so she says, it could happen right now. The point is, it's going to happen. She's talking about these machines breaking down. And it's entirely preventable. The goal shouldn't be to keep this place humming along for our lifetimes. She looked pointedly at John's. Or our current term. If the goal ain't forever, we should pack our bags right now. Jan's and Marin's stiffened at this. She felt her own body react, a chill coursing across her skin. This last line was dangerously close to treason. The metaphor only half saved it. She only made a joke about, if we're not creating machines that will help us for the next few hundred years, then what's the point? Might as well pack your bags because we're all dead anyways. And their first reaction is like a visceral flinch of, oh my gosh, this is treason. You can't even joke about that. You're going to get thrown outside. So it's like super, super taboo to even joke about it. And it has gotten people killed in the past. And yet nobody wonders why that is, why it's so taboo. That just seems unlikely to me that you wouldn't wonder about that. And I know why. Before I even read the book, I just read the premise and I already knew predictably why this is. But even so, you would think the characters who don't know, they would question it and they would wonder about it. But nope, they just know that it's gets you in trouble if you even pretend you want to go outside. So I thought that was a little bit strange. And then the world building was pretty lacking in my opinion. When I read dystopian novels or like science fiction novels where it's on a different planet or different things, like I expect quite a bit of world building. That's the most interesting part of these types of stories. But it was pretty lacking. Like you really don't know a whole ton about how this world runs. And the funny thing is you have this mayor and the sheriff who are like the main people in the story, and they don't seem to know much about it either. And their only explanation is because they live at the top of the skyscraper and they don't want to go down all those stairs all the way down, that's so much work. And so they just don't go down there. And then same with the people in the lower parts of the building or these silos, there's like a big window to the outside world. But it's almost like I can't think of the word right now, but it's like when people travel to see Mecca, it's like this thing you only do once every few years because it's so arduous to get there, which I thought was weird because, yeah, that's a lot of stairs. Yeah, it would be tiring. But at the same time, if this is your entire world that you live in, this is your current society, you would eventually get used to it. Like your body would get used to that kind of exercise and would get used to going up and down stairs. Like it wouldn't be that big of a deal, especially for kids growing up where that's all they did was go up and down stairs. And so I think it was pretty weird that that's like the only reason that nobody really visited a whole lot of levels. And so this mayor, who should take it upon herself, and the law officers should take it upon themselves to know about their society and about their world. They're just like, there's too many stairs, oh well, And so I just think that was pretty ridiculous. And also, they can't have landline telephones or heck, walkie-talkies or something. Like you would think that if they didn't want to go down all those stairs, they would have some form of communication to talk to people in the lower parts of the building. And why not have an elevator? Why is there only stairs? Like even mines going way, way deep have elevators. And, like elevators is pretty basic. They were invented in the early 19th century. It's not like they're advanced technology that they can't figure out how to do it. So I don't know why they didn't put an elevator in. That just seems nonsensical to me. And just like logistically, people that are bringing up all the food or all the other necessities of life, you would think you'd have an elevator as a way of getting all your goods up and down instead of having to carry them upstairs. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I thought that was pretty weird. And then also they have all these machines that do all these different things, and they're all run on oil, and they have an oil generator. And so again, I marked a passage, but she says, "They keep the whole place running," Juliet declared. "The oxygen you breathe, we recycle that down here. The toxins you exhale, we pump them back into the earth. You want me to write down a list of everything that oil makes? Every piece of plastic, every ounce of rubber, all the solvents and cleaners. And I'm not talking about the power it generates, but everything else." So she's talking about how oil, is used for all these different things and keeps these important machines running and their generators running. And I'm thinking, okay, you're in an underground silos, which means you have one oil well, and that dries up in like 20 or 30 years. 50 years if you're lucky. And these people have been down here for hundreds of years, and you expect me to believe that they didn't run dry? I am not buying it. I am not buying it. There's no way that oil well has lasted that long. So, I don't know. When I'm reading science fiction in particular, things like that just kind of irk me, because I'm like, it's one thing if you're writing like a romance or something and you make an innocent mistake like that, whatever. But science fiction, you really should know the science that you're talking about, like, I don't know. I just expect less of that type of mistakes when I'm reading science fiction. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know. But the fact that there were so many in this book was just a problem for me. And there was also a time where one of the characters dives down really, really deep and then just comes right back up and doesn't get the bends. Again, not buying it. And there's something else that happens which I can't really talk about because it's a spoiler. And these two things were solved, apparently. So I'm not going to finish reading this series because I just didn't like the first one. There was too many problematic problems with it, and I just have no desire to continue. But I looked up spoilers for the rest of the series because I just wanted to know what the mystery was. And outside of the ending of this one, which was pretty predictable, there was something else that happens in later books. And supposedly it explains why she didn't get the bends and why this other thing that happened the way it did. And also, I'm just using these two as an example, but there's obviously other things too. But it felt very much like a Deus Ex Machina where, it's just like, oh, this one reveal and it solves all the problems and it explains everything. But what I can't stand behind is the characters didn't know about this. So you would think that the character would at least have the thought, that's weird. Why isn't this the way that it should be? Or, in the case of getting the bends, she wouldn't know that she can't get the bends. And so she would take precautions against it because she didn't know that it wouldn't happen. You know what I mean? So it just didn't seem believable. It seemed like he made these mistakes and then in later books tried to correct it. I don't know if that's true, but that's just how it comes across to me. So yeah, I don't know. This one has so much hype. Everybody seems to love it, but I just found a lot of issues with it from a technical standpoint, and it just got in the way of my enjoyment. I just couldn't enjoy the book because of that. And like I said, a lot of it was pretty slow and boring towards the beginning. And I really wasn't connected to any of the characters except for the ones in the beginning, but they were only in those first 42 pages. Like, I don't know. So unfortunately, this book was just really not for me. So that's all the books I have to talk about. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. I post videos every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.